listening to the Podcast Advertising Playbook, your resource to better understand and execute successful podcast ad campaigns. Hello and welcome to the Podcast Advertising Playbook. I'm your host, Heather Osgood. I'm joined by Scott Simonelli. He is the founder and CEO of Veritonic. Scott, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Heather. Good to see you again. Thanks for...
Yeah, thanks for coming on. Good to see you too. So, I know that we've had you on this show before. I know that our listeners are familiar with Veritonic. So I wanted to start kind of the conversation today by talking a little bit about creative test measurement and exactly how that works. How does that creative test measurement really apply to advertising, and why is that important?
Sure. Great start and good question. Look, nothing's more important than creative. In advertising, as you look at what makes a difference, the creative matters. It matters a lot. And you can think about how much money you're spending and where you're advertising and all these other things. They all do matter. But the creative itself is the most influential, and getting the right creative in front of the right person at the right time is the holy grail of marketing, right? That's what everybody aspires to do. And testing creative is a really important aspect of that, as you can imagine. But what's hard about testing creative is, one, people don't think about the creative. They're thinking about all these other things. And as important as it is, people tend to forget about it.
Mm-hmm.
But two, testing creative can be very sensitive, right? So it's rich subject matter. And so people are invested in it. It's got their heart and soul in it, potentially. They've heard it a bunch, or they've seen it a bunch, and they've built it out, or they've paid a lot of money to generate it. And so that creative now is if you're going to test it, are you willing to change it? Are you willing to have it not be good? And where's that line between art and science? So creative but it's so rich, and the spectrum of outcomes can be very different. There's emotional response, there's engagement, which happens kind of on a time basis. There's memorability and recall, there's intent, there's brand lift. There's all these different things that kind of come out of creative. So it's the most influential piece. It's really important, but it's also the most sensitive and the most personal.
Right. So when you think about, I guess, that creative piece, do you find that because the podcast industry has been so strongly host-read, does it tend to be more fractured? What have you seen with kind of that host-read side of things?
That's exactly the kind of calling my baby ugly that you can get with creative, right? Because host-reads are effective because they're personal. And there's a connection typically between the host and the listener, right? Especially in podcasting. It's such a powerful medium in general because you're in people's ears, or you're in the car with them, and a host that you feel like speaking to you can be very influential at that time. It's a perfect storm. And so now it's I'm going to go test this, right? And so you got to test it. First off, so there's all those beliefs I just talked about, and you've got to tell the host that they need to say something different. A lot of those are either improv, even if they're scripted. There's probably aspects of it, are they going to read this more than once, or are they going to read 5 different versions? So what we've seen in our research, though, is that they are not the holy grail. It's not a silver bullet. There's no such thing. And so there are instances where an announcer read or canned ads perform on par or equal to a host read ad. And now we're in a universe where there could be AI generated ads or AI host read ads or all these other things. Where does that line get crossed? And so that's why even more than ever, it's important to have, quantitative and statistically significant research done on host read ads so that you can think about how to scale them and how to replicate them, and how to target them. Because I think they're a lot easier to do that with now than they were maybe 10 years ago. So, I think podcast advertising in general as a medium tends to be a little less rigorous on pre-market creative testing, and a little less rigorous there on kind of testing a little more. The standards are a little more loose there. And hosts, they just have a lot of sway, right? They're not going to, telling them what to do is not as easy. So, a host of a podcast probably has maybe a little more clout than the host of maybe a TV show or something like that, because the dynamic might be a little different. So that's why, you'd like to see more of that. And I think people doing more, I think we've done our first analysis on host read versus announcer read in 2018.
Oh, wow.
At the time it was I got emails. Like it's rare you get email from like a kind of like a partner or a client. It's like, how dare you say, I think that the kind of headline was like announcer read ads can score on par with host read ads. And at the time it was like controversial. So I think like, look, it's 2025. So I think people doing more of that would be better. But I will say like objectively, we don't see as much research done on host read ads in particular as other aspects of podcast advertising. And it's still a very sensitive area.
Yeah, yeah, I could see that. One of the thoughts that I have always had is that, obviously a lot of agencies are working with these brands. They're creating talking points. Those talking points are getting sent to like hundreds of different hosts. And I always think that the host is probably the least equipped person in the equation to put together a good ad read because they're not marketers. And we've worked with hundreds of different podcasts. I mean, I should start adding it up. I'm sure it's probably over thousands now. But you get hosts where we say, hey, you need to make sure that the call to action is strong. And they say, what's the call to action? Like they don't know, they don't understand the advertising world. They don't understand the business world a lot of times, right? Especially when you're talking with, I mean, it doesn't really matter which podcaster you're talking to, right? They're the talent. And so I think we give them these talking points and we assume that they can create this really amazing ad. Or one of my favorites is it's not uncommon for us to receive one set of talking points for an annual campaign. And, the host is expected to create many creative, interesting ad reads out of this one document that you've sent them to use for 12 months. And advertisers will say, well, we don't have anything different to tell them. And I'm like, well, you need to give them more direction than that, right? Like if we want to create compelling ads, we have to start with something compelling. And I totally agree. I think that host read ads are not scrutinized enough. And having a really good host read ad can make a huge difference in the success of the overall campaign. And so it doesn't really surprise me that sometimes announcer read ads can be more effective. I feel like just as a listener, when I hear a really succinct, well put together ad, it can be more effective than a rambling ad that really doesn't get to the point soon enough or doesn't hold my attention well. And so I think that, to your point, obviously we all love host read ads. We see how effective they are, and they obviously are very effective. But when it comes to really looking at a creative testing space, I could see where host read ads could be really difficult.
Yeah, I think it's funny, like, and I don't know why more people don't do this. Just read a bunch. Like have the host read 10 ads. Run them through, again, this is kind of self-serving given what Veritonic
Sure,
does.
sure.
Run a quick and dirty test. You don't have to go for 95% confidence, right? Just quick and dirty, right? There's solutions that we have that like can do this in a way, right? So you don't have to be like totally like, let's do predictive and have no rigor to this. There's a balance, right? And it's just like, do it. And then just like, by the way, run that on your demo for your podcast. Right? Just I'm laying the blueprint out for anybody who's listening. Like, here it is. Read a few, 5 to 10. Run them against the demo, target demo for the spot. Right? You have a general US and put in some 2 or 3 criteria. Household income, gender. They've listened to the podcast before. And then take the top 3 or target them if you can, and just do that every couple weeks, every month. There's no way on earth, especially on host read, which already matter, like that will yield results. I would take a bet with anybody who wants to take me up on that. Like, there's no way on earth, because your bar now is 0, right? You're just throwing stuff out there. It's literally spray and pray,
right?
And if you even put a little bit of let's run 10, and they could be 10 relatively similar scripts. Or if you're doing that, this is where I always say, like, data liberates creativity. Not the enemy of creative.
Right.
You can take 10 shots pre-market, 20 shots, doesn't matter. It doesn't cost more to test a few more. Then take some outside bets. Like, you might uncover the thing that you didn't think of, or you were unwilling to try. Or the host does something silly on one of the reads by accident. Ends up being the genesis for like the next 2 months. Right. So those are the kinds of things, when you don't do that, you're just status quo, or you're just hope is not a strategy. So it's just like, But that's where I just don't understand why the pre-market can, it's really what I've heard. And you would know this better than me, just given the business you're in, is that they don't have enough time.
Right.
Which
It's
is,
true.
that's like people telling me I don't have 20 minutes a day to exercise. But anyone who's listening, you have 20 minutes a day to exercise.
Right. Right.
Like, you can find it. It's like, oh, I got too busy to do blah, blah, blah. And it's like, as I'm getting older, that's just like, as we all get older, it's like, you got to continue. That's one of the big longevity things. Just go for a walk, do something, do a little bit of strength training for bone density. I don't need to get to the whole other podcast. But the fact is, like, if you don't have 5 hours, right? I don't think it takes more than that to read 10 creative and upload them and look at the numbers. If you don't have 2 hours to do pre-market creative testing, then I don't want to hear it.
Right, right.
It's just
Yeah.
nuts. Because I do hear the turnaround time is fast. By the time somebody preps the copy, gets it to the host puts off reading it, they're reluctantly reading it, and then they do it, and then the podcast has to launch. I get that there's probably some moving parts there. I understand. I appreciate that fact. But you got 3 hours. If it meant 10% more revenue for you.
Right. Well, then I think that that's part of what it comes down to at the end of the day is that ultimately better creative is going to produce better results. And if the advertiser sees better results, then the podcaster is going to get a renewal, which is going to mean more money. And, I think that certainly there is a case to be made that something like that is worthwhile for sure. I guess I'm curious because you have done so much kind of creative measurement in your career, especially as it pertains to podcasts. Is there anything that's been really surprising to you that you've come across that maybe you didn't suspect would happen, but showed up in the results or some data that you had seen?
For me, I'll give you kind of a couple of things. The biggest thing I learned between like 2018 and probably whatever, 2022, like the first 5 years of business, voice matters like more than music, and it's not even close.
No way. That totally surprises me.
Yeah, and I'm a composer, right? And the singer matters, right? When you listen to any good song, like whenever you're mixing, the first advice they give to producers when you're mixing is the vocal. If you think the vocal's loud enough, bump it up another dB, because it's probably not loud enough. And if you go back and listen, if you listen to like beautifully produced tracks, and you go listen to how loud the vocal actually is relative to everything else. And there's some people who don't even like, listen to music. No one ever like listens to a pop song. Like, wow, the hi-hat sounds great on that song. Or whatever.
True.
So like, but the fact is the human voice is really hard to top. And I'm really curious to see where AI voice goes. Because it is king right now. A good host right add to your point. But just like the power of the way somebody's saying something, their ability to kind of bring emotional response, visceral response in the moment, and just the tone. If a voice goes the wrong way, it's severe. And so there's people who won't make it 10 seconds. There's some people who have a high threshold for this. I'm an audiobook person. I listen to hours and hours of audiobooks. I have a pretty high threshold for pain, for like a bad voice. Although when I get someone like Barack Obama reading his own book, or Maya Angelou reading her own book, that it's amazing. You're getting this like really amazing speaker like to read to you, and they wrote it. That's hard to beat. So that's a big one. And I think the other thing that we notice in creative testing is how much time matters. Time and audio have a very specific relationship. You can't like separate them. Everything you're hearing happens over time. And when something happens in an ad is more important than what it is.
Oh, interesting.
Because if you don't get it at the right time, and contextually it's sandwiched between something else, or if you've already lost them before that thing happened,
right,
then you're screwed.
Right.
Or whatever that impact is not what it might be if it's somewhere else.
Right.
And it's funny, for all the copy testing we do and things like that, sometimes you did the right thing. You said the right thing. You just didn't do it before this other thing happened. We see it a lot with competitors being mentioned in ads. Because a lot of times people are listening a little more passively, especially in the car. And they might hear the competitor first. They might not know who the ad's for.
Right.
or you said something that turned the person off or didn't make the point, and then you nailed the point, but it happened too deep in the ad. One of our kind of best practices is mentioning your brand. A lot of people, they don't mention the brand at the beginning and the end of the ad.
And they should. Yeah.
They should. Yeah.
Yeah.
It could hit them and then hit them again.
Yeah. Yeah.
If you want them to remember, it's going to be the first thing, because at the end of the day, like when that ad ends, now they're somewhere else.
Right.
And if that journey's linear and then went away from your brand, you got to bring them back. It's a totally linear process. And so that second by second engagement that we look at, and like, we kind of look at that peak in emotional response or engagement when things are said. And sometimes it's the right copy with the right music bed, with the right sound design, with the right voice. Like, those are different items that, like getting them to sequence properly is, again, it's an art and a science. And sometimes most people today, I would argue, are just getting lucky.
Right.
Because there's not a lot of people kind of looking at things at that level. Even we don't really look at like all four of those things at that level all the time and then build the ad based on getting them all. That's a lot.
Sure.
And I think we're getting there with the use of AI and other things that we're developing. Like, I think the market eventually gets better at that. But voice and time are probably the two biggest things that you would take away, and just bring those into your mindset the next time you're creating an ad. Bring those into your mindset the next time you're thinking about a campaign. Obviously, it's audio. I get it. It's a podcast.
Sure.
Obviously, there's going to be voice. But how much are you really taking into account time? How much are you really taking into account the subtleties of the voice and the phrasing and the pacing and the timbre? There's so many aspects. The human voice is like a coral reef of spectrum. It's so rich. There's so many different things, and literally an ecosystem.
Yeah.
You say the same words so many different ways.
Yeah.
And so there's just so much there. You'll never get bored. That's one thing. It's kind of fun. We're never bored.
True.
When you're just looking at like internet ad banner copy, or like,
that would be boring. This is not
we did
boring.
like multivariate testing on like submit buttons.
Yeah.
Like, click here on green, click here on red. It's like, okay, after a while you start to lose your mind. Human voice, however, it's infinite.
Yeah. No, it's true. It's true. Yeah. You said so many things in there that were so good. I feel like it's so intriguing. One of the messages that I try really hard to communicate to our hosts who are creating host-read ads is that we have to have the audience actually listen to your ad in order for it to be effective, right? And I think one of the things you mentioned is really interesting to me. I'm a huge audio junkie and I retain audio super well. I probably retain audio better than I do reading something. Like the two are probably fairly neck and neck, but I love audio and I retain it really well. But I think we've all been in those places where we're listening to something as well as reading something. And all of a sudden you've totally spaced out and you're like, wait, what did I just hear? What did I just read? And you kind of try to find like your footing. You're like, wait, where am I at? And you have to go back. But I think that the same thing can happen with ads, right? Like you could be listening to a podcast, really engaged in the content. And yes, there's the skip button and people could skip the ad, but they can also tune the ad out. And if you're not creating something that's compelling enough for somebody to listen to, I think that is the very first step, is really making sure that that piece is there. And I guess I'm curious what your thoughts are, because I totally agree with you. I have been, just as a consumer myself, I've listened to ads where I'm interested in the product, but I don't know what the company name is. They haven't said the company name often enough, especially if it's a brand I've never heard of, right? But I always tell the hosts that they can start with some sort of a lead in, like a story that is going, because you figure you're going from content to ad content. And so you want to bridge that in a way that isn't super, here's an ad. So like, is there a story you can tell? Is there some sort of a hook you can put in at the beginning of the ad? But I guess I totally agree with you that when you're talking about a brand, it makes sense to say the brand at the beginning and the end. And I know we have gotten talking points where it'll say you have to say the name of the brand and the call to action like within the first two sentences or something, because they obviously have seen better results with that. But what is your take? Is it better to do like a little intro story, get people listening, and then kind of go into the ad read? Or is it better just to say, hey, we all know this is an ad. I'm just going to tell you you should go buy HelloFresh right now and we'll move on.
Right. Like there's no silver bullet. Like I think
Sure.
at the end of the day, like, and if I thought something works, it could not work by the time people listen to this podcast.
Sure.
So it's just dynamic. But I think you bring up an interesting point, and kind of woven in what you just said. Engagement is actually in one of the metrics that we have, and it's actually not our most looked at metric by our clients. And I think engagement needs to be more, needs to be kind of given higher priority, because that kind of point about time, but also retention. Like if you don't get them in the first couple seconds, and on certain podcasts, it may be better to lead in with a story because that's the style of that show. You look at the way like someone like one of our partners like NPR does a sponsorship and leads in versus the way an ad might run on a music station, personalized music station on Pandora. Those are going to be very different contexts or a host read ad. So like they're all going to be different. They're going to take different life forms, but you do want to get them in the first couple seconds, because then they might tune out later, or whatever. And so those first 3 to 5 seconds is really important. It sets the tone, and you want to get there. So with that, engagement as a metric, I think is not something that we kind of promote it because we're in that business. But at the end of the day, like people, they care about brand lift, or they care about attribution, or they care about all these other purchase intent is our most looked at metric.
Sure.
Right? Like, did somebody want to buy the product more or not? Or like that's what people will look at. But the fact is, like, that metric is informed by engagement. More engaged the user is, like, there's a straight correlation, like between, unless you're like making people angry and they're really engaged because they hate you, they're offended, which I guess is possible. It's usually going to be pretty much a straight line correlation between high engagement and brand lift, or high engagement and purchase intent, and high engagement and recall. And I think intent and lift get the headline, but engagement is really what makes that difference. And I think there should be more conversations about engagement. I think you see a little more on TV. You hear a lot of people talking about attention,
right?
Because TV advertising is a little further along in its lifespan, right? TV advertising started in the 20s. Nielsen, I think, started in 1930 or whatever, right? So TV advertising has been around a little while longer. So they have some things that they look at more, and they call it attention. And engagements, I think partly this is attributable to a lot of people come from digital advertising to podcast advertising, where engagement and attention is less of a factor. Because in the digital medium, time is less of a factor. An ad banner or a search ad, or even on a website, you move through a website in a pretty brisk manner. You're not spending time with it. And you're not, if anything, they want you to just get through it faster.
Sure.
Faster somebody goes from the search to purchase, the better. Like,
sure.
You're not going to sit around like browsing on your site, just costing them money. And whereas like TV, attention is always there, just like it is with audio. So I think, between 1930 and 2030, it'll be 100 years of TV advertising around almost. And it's going to take us maybe another 80 years for podcast advertising to pay more attention.
Don't say that, Scott.
Here we are, putting engagement. Maybe we can maybe jump the curve and take 30 years to do it. But like, engagement should be more of a focus than it is. And I think if you're paying attention to engagement, I think your brand lift, I think your purchase intent, I think whatever your kind of primary KPI, your engagement efforts will be in service of that primary KPI.
Right. I love that. I really believe that engagement is the most important element of podcast, because when you put everything else and stack everything else up against podcast, it is, in my opinion, the only platform where I am paying attention to what is being said. When we're doing a chore and when we're exercising and when we're driving, we're not paying attention to walking. We're paying attention to what we can hear, right? When we're folding our laundry and listening to a podcast, we're not paying attention to folding our laundry. All of those are second nature, right? Like, our bodies know how to perform these activities. When you're watching TV and an ad comes on, what is the first thing that every person in the United States does. They pick up their phone, they go on their phone, and they look at their phone during the ads, right? And what do we do when we're on social media? Like all of that is just so, like you said, like digital is so, so fast. There is not the same kind of engagement. But when you are listening to a podcast that is 30 minutes, an hour, 2 hours long, like you are paying attention to that content. And I think that it's just so overlooked. And to me, it is the difference maker in the industry that I don't think we pay enough attention to.
Totally true. And just personally, like nothing makes me happier than like whatever task I have to do that I can't stand. It's like I'm going to go power wash the deck or like, like boom, my audiobook's in or the podcast in. I'm like, this is awesome. I'm going to go drive my kids wherever I'm driving my kids constantly. It's like, I love it. My worst nightmare is like sitting in the car with them and I can't listen to my book. And I'm like, so like, but no, and those things are just like, you're super engaged. That's the reason, one of the great things about podcast advertising. I think if advertisers can do a better job of embracing that fact and putting data behind it, leaning into it. Because I think whenever it's you and I talking about it, we both are, theoretically in the space, despite our personal experiences that we love it. I'm audio first and I retain audio better than reading as well. I wish that if they had audiobooks when I was in like high school, as book on tape or whatever, I would have done way better.
Yes.
And I would, because I enjoy it. Just even if I don't enjoy the content, I can consume it readily. Just me personally. So like, but the fact is, like, I think what we'd like to see is more of the advertisers talking about this. Frankly, more of the advertisers talking about their personal experiences with podcasts versus, because of course I'm going to say it, of course you're going to say it in theory. Right. Whereas like, I think there's not as many brands or advertisers talking about these things. Because again, why would they, other than to us? Like, I think that's, hopefully that will change. Conversations about it become a more broad thing. Because the other point you brought up, it's absolutely true. We have data that supports this. People are not looking at the screen during the ad.
Yeah.
They're watching an ad. It's on live sports these days anyway, if they're forced to watch one. And the first thing you're doing is you're on FanDuel, you're on social media, you're doing anything on earth, but or you're getting your snack or whatever you're doing. You're not looking at that screen.
Right.
And that's data we've been looking at for a while. Like, so we really encourage our TV advertisers. Audio in a video ad is underserved. The time spent creating it, the budget for it, and certainly when you're looking at like most TV ads are just analyzed with a focus group. Right? They're not going to, the biggest, as far as that research goes, is like, did you like the music or whatever? Like we tested the audio. We asked if they liked the music. What are you talking about? So like, but that's something that I think will continue. That trend's not going to go away.
Right.
Nothing's going to make somebody look at a TV.
No.
During an ad. And so I think like you should be building that ad as if it's not going to be watched. And if you're not mentioning your brand, you're nuts.
Right.
Like you're not living on this planet. Like that's not even like, that's free advice from us. If you're not mentioning your brand twice in a TV ad, that's why I think we have seen more sonic branding research come through in the last 12 months. It kind of ebbs and flows, I think, a little bit with when people create audio logos, but we've seen a bit of a bump. I think that's a little bit of that coming.
Yeah.
It takes somebody having the personal experience. You could throw all the data in the world at them. Listen to this entire conversation, but until they sit there on the couch and it occurs to them that I work for company X and I just paid for that ad. Like, you'd have to take that person. I just bought that Super Bowl ad. I just spent for NFL. And it just occurred to me that like that ad went by, and if I weren't looking at the screen, I had no idea who that ad was for. Unless you were like the CMO or the chief advertiser and you had that personal experience, that you get off your butt then. But like, I think like self-serving data coming from podcast people isn't going to be what tips
it's not going to move the needle.
You need to have we're right, but nonetheless, you probably need to have the personal experience also.
Yeah, no, for sure. No, I think you're spot on though. I mean, like, think about now I'm going to have to really pay attention to TV ads because so many of them don't mention the brand at all in an audio form. And that is
Despite our
crazy.
best efforts, it's still by far the majority. I don't know what the percentage is, but it's go listen. It's going to be more than half.
Yeah, that's such a trip because everybody is looking at a device during a TV ad. But if I heard progressive, right, which I mean, progressive's probably not one of the offenders.
No,
But yeah, I mean, if you hear the name of the brand, at least you're getting something, right? At least you're getting some
yeah,
level of branding.
yeah.
Um,
Insurance actually is. If you want to look at an industry that, in all
does it
honesty,
well.
just because they're all it's commoditized industry. But there's some, I mean, go listen to a State Farm ad. They're going to hit you with audio logos left and right.
Yeah,
They're
insurance
so
companies
good
are
at it.
very good at it.
They're going to pay
Yeah.
for Caitlin Clark, which her ads are great. I don't know if you've seen them. They're
I don't
awesome.
I don't know if I have. I'll have to.
Yeah, she's been on. I've been watching a lot of the NBA finals or whatever. There's State Farm Caitlin Clark ads, which are great ads. But if you watch those ads, there's an audio logo in the beginning and an audio logo at the end of every State Farm ad. To their credit, they're really good at it. I think Progressive is pretty good about it too, off the top of my head. But that's if you're in some other industry other than insurance, if you want to look to an industry that's getting it right, like as a whole, those guys are really good at it.
Yeah, for sure. Well, Scott, thanks so much for coming on the show today. It was a lot of fun talking to you about creative testing. I don't think that we talk a lot about creative in this space, and we should do it more. So thank you for the conversation. And if people want to connect with you, where can they find you?
Scott at Veritonic.com. It's out there. I'm easy to find, although my identity's probably been hacked 15 different times, but that's my email. Or just go to Veritonic.com and you can find out more information. But thank you for having me. It's a joy to talk to you, just period. I'll do it anytime. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Scott. Thank you for listening. I hope that you've enjoyed this episode as much as I have. If you haven't checked out our YouTube channel, go ahead and head on over there. Got some great videos for you, and we will catch you again next episode. Thank you for listening to the Podcast Advertising Playbook, your source to a better understanding of the podcast advertising industry.